Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Ruhn Danaan, Crown Prince of the Valbaran Fae, is a mere cog in the Autumn King's world. Despite their blood ties, the two males disagree on many points, including the point that is Bryce Quinlan. Bryce and Hunt have their own tug-of-war, with Bryce doing her best to leave Hunt in the dark as she looks into the people who might link the deaths of Danika and Maximus Tertian. The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author.
This podcast is a discussion, shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
The interpretations presented in this podcast are just a few of the many possibilities. Listeners are encouraged to read along and share their own analysis of the text.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series and extended universe spoilers may be discussed with or without warning.
Explicit language as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised. This is part 1 of this week's episode. Stick around for part 2, which releases on Thursday.
Welcome to BookTok for BookTok, a podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels.
This season, we're exploring Sara J Maas's first installment in the Crescent City series. This is Jac.
And I'm Amy. This week, we're discussing chapters 14 through 17 in House of Earth and Blood.
This week, we ask ourselves, who possesses the illusion of control, and who is the master of it?
The theme we see in this section is titles. We start this episode with Ruhn standing in a doorway, and we know doorways are important. What I think is happening in this scene is his transition from his rebellious life to his obedient life. I feel like Ruhn possesses those two identities. And, you know, the Autumn King on a dime is going to be like, hey, Ruhn, come over. So Ruhn, unprepared, has to make that transition quickly, which is why he's panting. He's stopping at the doorway before he passes through.
I love that. Someone didn't read your notes.
Someone didn't put it in their notes.
That makes a lot of sense. It's done like, oh my God, that's such a good point. I love that.
The doorway itself signifies this transition. The doors are towering oak doors versus what Ruhn just came from, an unofficial office above a dive bar. Like, it's a big difference. Within the study itself, there's also a golden balcony, and it reminds me of the gold bar on the mezzanine in The White Raven, which we talked about previously being a symbol of status. Like Bryce in episode 2, Ruhn feels out of place compared to all these trappings. Whereas before, he had the illusion of fitting in. Mm-hmm. Now he doesn't fit in so much.
Yeah, he fits in so perfectly. His little dive bar.
Yes.
I'm going to be giving him a lot of crap on that this episode. But, you know, this also just really reminds me of Bryce in every way. Like, you know, going back to The White Raven. And I think that this is the beginning of a lot of their mirroring of how they're similar and so opposite of one another sometimes, where it's like, you know, that night where Danika died, it started with those big doors. And just the same way here, like everything's about to change for him with those big doors.
That's a great point. When I was reading House of Earth and Blood for the first time, or like at least analyzing it, I was certain, this is another one of SJM's made-up names. And it is not.
Ruhn?
Ruhn actually means great or mighty. I can't remember where it comes from. I didn't write that down, but it's a real name.
Okay.
Ruhn himself is addressed as Prince by the Autumn King. So Ruhn meaning great and mighty is fitting for someone who's a prince.
Mm-hmm.
However, the use of the title Prince feels derogatory here. It almost, quote unquote, dehumanizes Ruhn in my eyes, because Ruhn is never addressed by his name, from what I recall in this scene. The Autumn King addresses Ruhn as an object, a good soldier, a subordinate. And the title itself just gives this illusion of power to Ruhn, but Ruhn is actually, I was going to say useless, but he's not powerful when compared to the king.
I think it's fair to say useless. I'm going to make a good case of that.
Yeah, he has no authority.
Yeah.
Let's say that. This is emphasized by a quote that alludes to something we've talked about in earlier episodes about this illusion of power in the hierarchy of the city. Quote, "The 6 lower heads were all appointed by Micah, not elected by any democratic process. There were councils within councils designed to give the illusion of control, but the main order of things was simple. The governor ruled, and the city heads led their own districts under him." I point this out because it's the worst version of pay it forward. Micah doesn't have control, the Asteri do. So he takes control from the city heads, who have no control. And they take it from their subordinates, who have no control. And it's just this vicious cycle of people pretending to have control and nobody has control.
This is hitting me hard on reality.
Well, I mean,
right?
It's very emblematic of society in a lot of ways.
It just reminds me of, like, we vote for our city council, and our city council votes for other things. And then we have, our congressmen and senate, and, just like, and yet, is anyone ever in control? But not really. And it all, at the end of the day, like, the people are the ones who get screwed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like I said earlier, Ruhn's title of prince is the same as this concept. It gives him an illusion of power or control. However, I think this is the first scene where we really get that sense. Quote, "Ruhn had been heading up the Fae division of the Ox for 15 years now. His father had given the command, and he had obeyed. He had little choice. Good thing he'd trained his entire life to be a lethal, efficient killer. Not that it brought him any particular joy." At this point in my reading, I was like, oh, poor baby Ruhn. What would people like Ruhn and even Hunt have been if they had had choices? Because I don't think Ruhn would be working in the Ox if he had had a choice.
He'd be a drummer.
Yeah, I was going to say he'd be in a band.
He'd be in a band. Like, that's where he'd be, honestly. Like, just maybe a successful band, probably not.
Probably not, but you know what? He would love life.
He would love life. Live, laugh, love would be Ruhn. It's funny because, like, this whole idea of Ruhn, and we, definitely me, will be harping on Ruhn a little bit in this episode. And I'm not doing it just to give him shit, but it's just like, I think this is what makes him a complicated character. Because even though we get the sense that he's, not in control of anything, he's still a leader of the auxiliary. Mm-hmm. That's still a responsibility. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are people on the street saying, oh, thank God we have the auxiliary protecting us. You know what I mean? Like, It's not nothing. Right. But it feels like nothing because Ruhn is basically making us feel like it's nothing. Mm-hmm. And I think that, like, it goes back into, like, the other idea of titles. And Prince, his dad, the king, does make it seem very demeaning, right? Like, hello, Prince, and all this other stuff. But Ruhn is the one who's giving that the demeaning power, because Prince, again, is still pretty powerful if Ruhn were just to lean into that power. Yeah. And just like with everything else, where he's trying to resist the role by thinking that it's nothing when it could be something. Like, he's not letting it have the power that it should have. And that's the thing with everything in his life. His shitty office, his shitty home, which we'll see in a bit. Those are things that are given to him, and just like his title, and he's not taking care of them.
So I want to counter you because I view Ruhn's choices as a means to an end. And what I mean by that is that he is hyper aware of the power differential between him and his father.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to talk about that more in this episode. But his choices about the way he looks and where he stays, on one hand, are rebellious, right? A rebelliousness toward his father, toward his title. However, I get the sense from this chapter he actually does care and does want to lead. But his father's going to kill him the second he poses a threat. And so the way he leads his life, the way he looks, is to distract his father from his ultimate desire, which is to be a worthy leader.
I can see that. It's, I'm jumping ahead to like later what we'll cover, but you know, I mean, again, this is why I think Ruhn is so complex as a character, because when I view him and I view Bryce is given a nice apartment because of Danika and her will. And Ruhn is given, not even given, he chooses the shitty place because, you know, for whatever reason, but like when life gives you lemons, make lemonade type of thing. And, you know, to your point, Ruhn knows that he can only go so far. Otherwise, his dad will see him as a threat. But I don't think he respects his power that he can have.
And I think that's a symptom of how powerless his father has made him feel all his life.
Oh, yeah. No, it's not his fault. Definitely. Fuck you, Ruhn, for not understanding things. No, that's daddy issues for sure.
Daddy issues, trauma, PTSD, all those fun things.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay, Ruhn. I'm not mad at you, sweetie.
However, while you were talking, I had this thought, and please, please, please put your weapons away. Nobody come after me.
Oh, boy.
Ruhn's complacency feels a lot like Tamlin from Thorns and Roses.
I agree. He
has power. Yeah. He has respect. He is capable of so much.
And he's choosing to waste some of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is like, it kind of goes back to like one of our like, you know, ask us anythings. And it was like, you know, I think it was an fuck, marry, kill. And I think like I said, no, even though Rhys isn't my go-to, I would prefer him over Ruhn because Ruhn isn't playing the game yet.
Right.
He's immature.
He is immature for a almost 80-year-old Fae. He's got a lot of growing up to do. And that's a result of trauma that he hasn't worked on.
Yeah.
So I say that he's a lot like Tamlin. Tamlin was also damaged. Mm-hmm. I have more faith in Ruhn's ability to grow. Yes,
I agree. There's going to be a split in the road.
There sure is.
Tamlin's going to go one way.
Ruhn's going to go the other way.
I mean, at this point, we still haven't read the third book. I think he might pick up a fiddle.
Oh, start that band. So on the topic of this power struggle and these power dynamics between both Ruhn and his father, I want to acknowledge that Bryce is the third piece in their power struggle. Between the three of them, there's this constant tug of war that I really find fascinating. And we've seen a little bit of Bryce and Ruhn. Right now we're seeing Ruhn and the Autumn King, and we're going to see Bryce and the Autumn King later on. Mm-hmm. And how the power shifts is really important in this novel. So let's talk about Ruhn. Quote, "Though they were close in the depth of power, the fact remained that Ruhn would always have just a little less than his father. He never decided whether it was a relief or a curse to have come up short on the power ranking." And this is where I think about Ruhn's motivations, because if he really believes it's a curse for him to come up short, it implies to me a desire to be more powerful than his father and able to potentially dethrone him in the future.
Well, I mean, he's letting that power ranking define.
Right. Instead of being like, oh shit, I have a ton of power.
Or just strategy then.
Yeah.
I feel like, and again, I don't know whether it's fair or not to compare him to Rhys, but I'm gonna. And it's one of those instances where it's like Rhys would not, the King of Hybern, stronger than Rhys.
Yeah.
Right? It comes into strategy. Like, rather than looking at it and say, oh my God, I am basically as strong as him, just a little bit. All I need to be is a little bit smarter, and he's done.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to go after it.
Yeah, and this is where I think about Ruhn being the equivalent of an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
He is almost 80, but his father is almost 500. So he is less than 20% of his father's age.
Yeah.
So he's not even 20 in human years, like in terms of development, in terms of lifespan. And he just seems like another boy who's like, well, can't be helped. Let me just go play my video games.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, there is a line of not being, not having the drive. Because later on, he's going to point out Bryce has that drive.
Yep.
Whatever she wants, she's going to set her mind to it. And that's not Ruhn. But is that not Ruhn because of the daddy issues and he never had a chance to run with it? Or is that just not him? Well, I don't know. We're not here to answer that. Or are we? Amy looks like she's about to. I think it is possible to have the drive driven out of you.
Yes.
But I also think that drive is very much inherent to someone.
I think I agree with you. I think the drive might actually be inherent in Ruhn. I think it was conditioned out of him. And that's the difference between him and Bryce. Is because he has been conditioned for the last 80 years to be a certain way. And Bryce got to escape that.
Yeah. I do love Ruhn. Oh my God.
I love Ruhn.
Oh my God.
He's just a troubled little emo boy.
In my mind, he's sitting right there on the couch. And we get to talk.
Watching you.
Watching us talk about him. Maybe that's not what I'm imagining. That's awkward.
When I think about Ruhn and the Autumn King, it makes me also think about Sabine and Danika and how the two of them looked so similar because Sabine hadn't been aging.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a quote in this chapter that basically says the same of the Autumn King. So it says in this chapter, quote, "The Autumn King still showed no signs of aging, not as the Fae did, with their gradual fading into death. So it'd be another few centuries of this. Playing prince, having to knock on a door and wait for permission to enter, having to kneel and obey." That has to be really, really discouraging to look at your father. You probably look the same age. You've been kneeling and scraping for 80 years and you're going to have to do it for 300 more.
Yeah.
No wonder why Ruhn has this defeatist attitude.
Yeah, daddy fucks. You know, in every sense of the word.
I don't know what you mean.
And just with life. You know, he fucks with life. It's, I don't know what you mean with this. That's like, I mean, in my mind, Ruhn looks mid-20s. Or no, I guess he's older then. I would guess late 20s.
Okay.
I'm going to say, I mean, maybe Ruhn, and I mean, I don't think this is what's going to happen, but in my mind, he's going to look late 20s, even though theoretically he could have made the drop in his 20s, like early 20s.
Right.
And he's stuck looking like that.
Right.
But in my mind, like his dad is, I don't know, like a 30s, I guess?
Yeah.
But 30s looks like 20s now.
Yeah.
It's all confusing.
It is really confusing. I don't know. What I do know, though, is that the Autumn King treats Ruhn like he's not even there. Like he summons him like a dog. And the entire time they're having a conversation, he doesn't even look at Ruhn. He's just fiddling with his equipment and conducting his experiments.
I don't know what this says about me, except I do. And I'm okay with it. I was like, I respect the power play.
I mean, that's exactly my point. It's a huge power play.
Yeah, and it was like, I'm not going to say it was hot, but you know.
Oh my gosh.
I said I'm not going to say that it's hot.
But that implies.
I'm not saying that it's hot. But it just like, you know, the whole like, I'm going to summon you. You're going to come here like my little bitch boy like you are. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even going to bother looking at you.
Yep. And then I'm going to make you use your sparkly light.
Come use your sparkly little light. I mean, like Bryce Quinlan vibes.
It is.
And that's what Ruhn says.
Yeah. Yep. The two are the same.
Mm-hmm.
During the conversation, though, the Autumn King, if I was mad at him before for treating Ruhn like a dog, he treats Bryce even worse, only deigning to call her that girl. And I thought a lot about this and why. Could it be as simple as he embarrassed her when she went to see the Oracle when she was 13? Sure, yeah, it could be. But I think it's more than that when it comes to the Autumn King. It's more than just appearances. It's also power for him. And Bryce fucked up the stable power differential between the Autumn King and Ruhn when she entered their lives. Quote, His father's treatment of Bryce had opened Ruhn's eyes to Autumn King's true nature, and the cold Fae male before him had never forgotten this fact. Ruhn could have probably been a complacent little soldier for the rest of his life had Bryce not come in and flipped the switch on him.
Yeah, and I wonder a lot about that, right? Like, there's that resentment that the father must have for Bryce, because now, for the first time, it sounds like Ruhn was willing to kind of fight back a little bit, push back and question. But I wonder if there's any resentment on Ruhn's part, where now my image of my father is gone. Not that he blames Bryce for that, but just that, like, my life I was living in blissful ignorance.
Yeah.
And now I'm not.
Yep. I think we don't really get into the past confrontation between Ruhn and Bryce in this episode, but I think their last fight that put them in this bad state that they're in their relationship was probably a symptom of that resentment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go on a hunch here. I'm gonna say that Ruhn did not go to therapy when Bryce showed up. And here's the thing: this world has phones, has TV,
has hacking.
They have therapy.
Yeah.
So I can judge everyone more. But like I'm gonna say Rooney Boy did not go to therapy and did not work it out and say, oh wow, maybe my relationship with this person that I do care about deeply is the precipice of where everything changed.
Right. Well, because even if there was therapy, the Autumn King would never allow Ruhn to have therapy because the therapist would be a mandated reporter and would have to report all the shit that happened to Ruhn as a child.
You think they'd have to be a mandated reporter? Oh, only if Ruhn admitted.
Only if, but you run that risk.
You do run the risk. Well, do they have to report
past violence?
Huh?
Past violence?
Yeah.
If they're still at home?
But Ruhn lives over a bar. He works over a bar.
I don't know. It would be easy to blackmail the Autumn King with that information.
There's no chance that they would do that. It's the same way that the firm wouldn't let Meghan Markle go to therapy. You have nothing to say to that.
I have nothing to say to that. I'm sorry. I have no context for that.
Do you know who I'm talking about?
I know who Meghan Markle is.
The firm's the royal family.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's what they call. I don't know if that's what they call themselves, but that's like
what other people call them.
I feel like they would call themselves that. But yeah, she essentially, like, she says that she wasn't allowed to go to therapy. And I do believe that, where it's like people who are in power.
Yeah.
Are like, we're not airing our business.
Yeah. So let's talk about another fucked up relationship. And that is Ruhn and his mother.
You can't have daddy issues without mommy issues.
Honestly, you can't be royalty without issues.
Yeah.
I think that's the answer. I don't think Ruhn respects his mother. Let me read you a quote to demonstrate why I think that. Quote, just as Ruhn's mother had obeyed everyone her entire life, she wasn't queen, wasn't even a consort or mate. No, his sweet, kind mother had been selected for one purpose, breeding. He'd never heard her speak one ill word about his father, about the life she'd been conscripted to. Ruhn couldn't tell if he admired his mother for never questioning the gilded cage she lived in, if something was wrong with him for resenting it. So his mom has been compared to a horse or any type of animal that you breed, a bird, a soldier. And like, of the 4 people in this family, she is the lowest in like rank and in stature in Ruhn's mind. And you can just see it just because of how he compares her to animals.
Yeah.
Which is really a terrible thing to think about your own mother.
I don't think I've ever compared my mom to an animal. What would she be? Chupacabra.
Maria. At one point, the Autumn King and Ruhn are fighting over Ruhn's mother and who's going to tell Ruhn's mother that there are murders going on again. And the king tells Ruhn, don't tell me how to manage my relationship with your mother. Ruhn responds, quote, you don't have a relationship. You bred her like a mare and sent her out to pasture. Like, dude, that's things you think. You don't say that out loud.
No, and everything about this screams, I'm a boy with issues who refuses to have any critical thinking skills. Because I'm going to read another quote. as the daughter of a prominent noble house that had defected from a Valens court. Okay, her family had left this other court. They needed stability, clearly. They needed help. What is the strongest thing they can do? Form an alliance with the Autumn King. You don't even have to tell me the details to know she did this for her family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For their safety.
And that's why she's so compliant.
Yeah, because she's probably can't risk anything.
Mm-hmm.
Probably can't risk whatever delicate situation her sisters, brothers, nieces, nephews, whatever it is, mother, father, like she probably can't afford to risk their lives
Mm-hmm.
and made a choice to be that. And rather than saying, wow, my mom was strong.
Mm-hmm.
My mom had to do something that she probably did not want to do. Not only did she do it, she did it with grace.
Mm-hmm.
She did it while still loving me and not resenting me. And she even makes a point of like, she was always nice. She was nice to Bryce too, a few times that she saw. And it's just like the fact that he views her as weak is so like, you don't even want to try to think about what her life is like.
Well, to me, it's symptomatic of the fact that he's a spoiled little rich boy. And he has been abused. He has had a terrible upbringing. However, beyond how his father treated him, he's never known strife outside of that.
Yeah.
Right? He's always had things provided for him.
Mm-hmm.
He, is a leader. He is well respected. So, to some extent, he is spoiled. And he's not capable of empathizing with his mother, who may have lived in fear.
Fear, hunger, who knows what? Like, there could have been moments where she made that choice of like, hey, I'd rather live. It doesn't seem like she has a bad end of the deal.
Right. Well,
she lives in comfort.
Mm-hmm.
She has her own, she's able to do her own thing. It doesn't sound like he even wants to deal with her. Like, she could be living her best possible life. For me, what I see with this is that like Ruhn clearly views strength as his father.
Yeah.
He is strong in all things, right?
Right.
And he is the ultimate masculine. And we're going to go a little bit more into this in this chapter about like, fragile masculinity and everything. But like his father in Ruhn's mind is the ultimate male.
Right.
And he's strong. Therefore, his mother, and I think it's more of like a default rather than truly believing it, is weak and feminine.
Right.
Her kindness is weakness. Her kindness is not, wow, she really took one for the team there. It's, oh, you're complacent, you're quiet, you don't care.
Right. And that to me is Ruhn projecting his own self-hatred.
Yep. Because he's quiet and complacent.
Exactly.
Versus like, you have your reasons and your mom might have his reasons. But keep that in mind for when I talk a little bit later of that masculine-feminine dynamic too. So, a little bookmark there.
We'll put a pin in it and come back to it.
Yeah.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/BookTok.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Blinds.com's Black Friday sales event is happening now with our best deals of the season. Let our design experts help you make the perfect selection for your home on your schedule. We can send free samples right to you and handle everything from measure to install. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 50% site-wide, plus doorbusters, and a free professional measure at the Blinds.com Black Friday sales event now. Rules and restrictions may apply.
In last week's episode? Oh my gosh, these episodes are already going by too fast. In one of our episodes, we talked about Ruhn's appearance being a form of rebellion. And I think that's true, but as we mentioned earlier, it's also the way he chooses to live his life. Ruhn has been gifted a villa. A villa. And he refuses to stay in it and instead buys dilapidated houses that he shares with his roommates for the last 50 years or whatever.
Dumb boy shit.
Dumb boy shit. That's exactly right. I mean, why couldn't he have given the villa to Bryce and her friends?
Right?
If he didn't want to stay.
Or like, you can go and still hate your father. I'm going to say, you know what? I was saving this for the chapter where they go in to the party where Bryce goes in there. And I'm going to say it now. It smells. I don't have to be there. Of
course.
But it smells. You know what? The villa probably smells nice.
Yeah. Probably
Always.
has people who clean it every day.
Every day.
Another form of rebellion, though, in my mind, besides the appearance, besides rejecting the villa, is the way Rhys thinks secretly about his powers. And this goes back again to this whole, he can't defy his father for risk of being viewed as a threat. But I think he really, really relishes being Starborn, not because he wants to be the chosen one, but because it pisses his father off.
Yeah.
And we see that in his thought process here. Quote, "It still chafed, didn't it, that your son, not you, retrieved the Star Sword, that your son, not you, stood among the long-dead Starborn princes, and was deemed worthy to pull the sword from its sheath. How many times did you try to draw the sword when you were young?"
I would like to point out real quick before you go on.
Yeah.
That's the first true monologue we've had in this book.
Yeah.
And Ruhn doesn't say this to his dad.
Nope.
This is him being like, I have feelings and I'm going to say them in my head to you.
Right. And it is very weak of him being unwilling to say those things to his father. And just as Ruhn thinks about this whole idea of being Starborn chafing his father, I think that is exactly why his father acts the way he acts. The Autumn King has always had power over Ruhn. We know from this chapter that he's abused Ruhn with fire. However, I think the additional layer of Ruhn being Starborn results in this pantomime that they're going through. They're having a conversation, but the Autumn King doesn't look at Ruhn, is playing with his experiments, tells Ruhn to light his sparkly finger, and it's, to me, just a power play of like, you come when I call, you use your special gifts when I say you use them, and everything is for my benefit. And he lords over Ruhn in a very special way that drives me bonkers, but just had to point that out.
Well, it's great because it kind of answers the question to Ruhn's monologue. The whole, like, how many times doesn't it drive you crazy? Doesn't, and the way that he acts, I'm like, I don't think it does drive him crazy. That
the Autumn King?
Yeah.
I think the opposite. I think it does.
Okay, it does. But what I'm saying is his actions are very much like, I don't think it drives, like, you know, sorry, I didn't say it correctly. The way that he acts around Ruhn is like, he doesn't drive him crazy at all.
Right. He's
really good at it.
He's putting on the appearance of being nonchalant.
Yeah. But I agree. It does drive him crazy. Like,
but
He's a
at
petty,
the same
petty
time,
man.
exactly, he's being a petty bitch.
Yeah. No, like, it is like, hey, I'm going to come over, light your sparkly finger. No, it is absolutely. I said it wrong. But yes.
It's okay. You're
Yeah.
forgiven. So, Bryce is starborn. And at one point, when Ruhn calls on his power, he thinks, quote, the power shimmered with anticipation, warm and lovely, and just about the only part of himself he liked. And I've wondered a lot about this. Why is this the only part of Ruhn that he likes? Is it because his father wanted it and he didn't have it? Is it because it makes him special? Is it because
He's full of shadows and this is the one light?
exactly, he's an emo boy and this is the one piece of light in his life?
Well, I mean, like, he literally controls shadows.
Yeah, yes.
I wasn't sure.
You were being literal. I was being
Okay, I was like,
metaphorical.
wait, I don't think... Did you know he has power of shadows? Yeah. Many reasons.
I think without him knowing it also, I think his starbornness connects him to Bryce.
Mm-hmm.
And we see later how he talks about Bryce being the only bright spot in his life.
Yeah.
Whether or not he's truly cognizant of Bryce as starborn, it connects him to her and they do have a special connection. And I think that's why he likes his starbornness.
Oh,
Just my thought.
I like that.
I want to also acknowledge that the Autumn King is a pretentious asshole and uses the old Fae language to record all his notes. I'm sure, A, because it's secretive and less people can read it, but also I feel like this is going to be relevant later in the series. I just have to say that.
Yeah. Again, guys, the book hasn't come out yet. We're recording this in December.
Oh, it is December. You're right. I was like, it's November. Nope, it's December.
I'm like, we're like past midway.
Yeah, I know. Then we get to the point where the Autumn King drops the bomb on Ruhn that, hey, you know what? It's time for you to get married. Time for you to find an appropriate partner.
Yep.
And obviously, Ruhn's not going to have it because he is the ultimate bachelor. He hangs out with his bros.
Yep.
They fight, they drink, they do drugs, and they have fun. He is not marriage material.
Boys. They're gross, smelly boys.
Just like the Autumn King playing with his experiments, the declaration that it's time for an arranged marriage is an exhibition of power on the Autumn King's part. Because as Ruhn points out, the Autumn King isn't married.
Yeah.
Marriage wasn't necessary for him to have his title. And the king is doing it now because it's convenient for the king.
You know, I feel like the Autumn King is just like trying to give Ruhn issues with women. Like there's a lot of like toxic masculinity in Ruhn and Hunt that is like not, I don't think it's who they are, but taught. I mean, like Ruhn would be like, wait, you're strong and you don't need a wife.
Right.
Are you saying I need a wife? Like, you know.
Yeah, right. What does that say about me as a man?
And also, does that mean like women are bad? You know what I mean? Like,
Right,
it's just like,
right.
I can see him having complicated relationships with women. So.
No, I think that's a great point. What's happening here is the unhealthy power dynamics between father and son are enforcing unhealthy views of power in relationships.
Yeah.
And Ruhn is not ready to be married because all he's going to do is repeat history.
Yeah.
Because he's only learned from the best.
I mean, he's not even repeating history because his dad was too good to even be with someone to break up with them. You know?
Yeah, that's true. But he could still play out the abuse that his father
Oh, yes,
forced on
absolutely.
him.
Yeah, completely. It cracks me up at one point. There's no real note to this, but so the Autumn King is like telling Ruhn about like, you know, we have to get the horn because you're all a bunch of weaklings now and they used to be super strong and now you're all just a bunch of weak little shits and fuck you. First off, Ruhn is barely less powerful than you.
Yeah.
Also, it gave me like, my note is literally, okay, boomer, because it's like you're just blaming a generation which had no say in what happens
Yep.
on the decisions of past generations.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
It just, it might, you know, it made me defensive as a millennial of like, you're just a bunch of entitled, you know, kid. I'm like, oh, sorry that I want a job. I'm sorry that I was promised that I wouldn't have my little tangent. I remember at one point I was like asking my mom, I'm like, did I make things up? I had this impression after growing up in the 90s and watching movies that like people had jobs out of college. I think Father of the Bride with Steve Martin. And I'm like, they just kind of like were able to afford things.
Yeah.
Like a house.
Yeah.
And they got...
And babies.
And they had like jobs right out of college. And I was like, was that... And I had to ask her because I was, you know, a kid in the 90s. I'm like, was that true?
Yeah.
She was like, yeah, it was. And I'm like, my mind can't even fathom.
Yeah. I mean, my dad had a job right out of college. And he had me, I was born the last semester of college.
Yeah. Like, I can't imagine of like, wait, you mean you're not scrambling for a couple of years after trying to figure out what to do?
Or a decade.
Right? So Ruhn sees the king's request to like go find the horn as a way of, you know, the Autumn King to shove it to Micah, right? Like he recognizes that it's comes from a place of toxic masculinity because the king flat out says like that Micah, quote, insulted our strength. He said we gave up the horn in the first place, then let it get lost 2 years later. And Ruhn thinks, quote, petty, brittle male. That's all his father was. Like he recognizes the toxic masculinity aspect to it. And Ruhn knows that this is fragile, that this type of attitude is very male and it's very weak. And it's important for that because that's like what makes me be like, okay, you're not a sexist asshole, right? Like you recognize all this. But then it's really funny because then Ruhn gets into a pissing match with Hunt later. So,
and I think it's because they have no models for the opposite.
Yeah.
Right? They have no models that are not toxic masculine.
I feel like after reading these like chapters, this is SJM's most accurate portrayal of men.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah. They're all so stupid.
I agree. Even though Ruhn sees the weakness in the Autumn King, he also remembers his past trauma in this moment. And it shows us that the Autumn King, regardless of however petty he might be, is still a threat. And Ruhn is conditioned to obey him, regardless of whether or not he thinks it's a waste of time for him to go look for Luna's horn. Quote, Ruhn suppressed his urge to cringe, his body tensing with the memory of how the king's burning hand had felt wrapped around his arm, sizzling through his flesh. No shadows had ever been able to hide him from it. And you can see in that moment how, or at least in my mind, how everything Ruhn does in his father's presence is influenced by that.
Yeah. He might have had a charmed life in some ways, but he was still abused by his father. Did he have a lot of money growing up? Yes. Did Bryce have a lot of money growing up? No. Was she raised by the best mother and stepfather? Yes. Was Ruhn hanging on by a thread? Yes. So, you know, it's SJM just does such a good job of like, here is all of the different facets of this man.
Yeah, she does in one chapter. What I love more than anything, though, is that we see Ruhn mischaracterize Micah's motivations for putting the king on a wild goose chase for Luna's horn. And we saw that with Ruhn and his mother. Yep. We're going to see it with Ruhn and Bryce. We're going to see it with Ruhn and Hunt. And we're going to see this, all of these characters mischaracterize other people's motivations. And it's just a very human thing to do. So I love that SJM honestly uses it well. And yes, we end up with this really, really long novel because people make bad assumptions all the time.
Yeah.
But it's the most realistic thing that could happen.
Yeah.
Quote, Micah knew pissing off the Fae King with a reference to his fading power was a good way to ensure the Fae Ox was up to snuff before the summit, regardless of any war. Bryce will do the same thing with Sabine later on, making the assumption that Sabine wanted to kill Danika. And we're going to see it again and again. And I'm going to have to point it out because SJM does it on purpose. In her other books, her other characters sometimes figure things out too easily or too quickly.
Yeah.
And she doesn't allow that to happen here.
No one's smart in this book. No, they're all smart. It's just like a more realistic process.
Right. And this is the point where I once again risk tomatoes being thrown at me. But I want to compare Ruhn and the Autumn King's relationship to Bryce and Danika's, where Danika is like the Autumn King and Bryce is like Ruhn. You talked a lot in the first episode about Danika being commanding, being kind of that alpha role in Bryce's life, being manipulative in a lot of ways with like, come on, it would just really make me smile if you and Connor went out. And in that way, the Autumn King is the same, manipulating emotions, being commanding, and saying his word is law. The difference is the Autumn King is abusive, Danika is not, but they're both toxic relationships. And I think that's where, to me, I see even more parallel between Bryce and Ruhn.
I don't have tomatoes to throw at you, but if I did, I would. Not because I disagree, but because I love it. Yeah, I think, to me, it makes sense, right? And it could be I don't know if there's like a word or some way to define it, but like it's that negative entity, like the person who may not have your best interest or something, right? Like Danika, she loved Bryce. She would do anything for Bryce except tell her the truth.
Right.
You know, like
it's true.
And that's like, you know, and does Autumn King love Ruhn? No. But these are two people who make choices that are selfish that impacts these siblings.
Yep.
So I'm on board.
Why, thank you.
Yeah.
So this is the moment where I pass the proverbial baton to Jac, because this past chapter, chapter 14, was all about power. And this next chapter, chapter 15, is all about male-female dynamics.
Boy, aren't they.
But before I let Jac take it away, I do want to acknowledge that Bryce is still very, very mad at Fury and Juniper because they don't talk to her directly. Fury calls Juniper to tell Bryce, and Juniper texts Bryce instead of calling about the whole Briggs situation being innocent and the murders are happening again. And Bryce is mad about it. And on one hand, I can see her reasoning. On the other hand, I have to point out that just like Bryce has certain ways of coping with her grief and having power over that grief, this is how Fury and Juniper are demonstrating their control over their grief.
Yeah.
And does it make them bad friends? Sure. But people are allowed to be bad friends.
Yeah. But I don't know. I'm also like, they're not hiding it from her. There's so many times where it's like, hey, can you let them know X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, but I think for Bryce, it's Fury hasn't talked to her in 2 years, hasn't responded to a call.
Yeah, you're right. You know, you're right.
You would be mad at me if I didn't talk to you for 2 years.
Good luck. Good fucking luck. I'm there. I'm always there. I'll be here. So going back into last chapter, right? Again, we'll see it in the future. Ruhn compares Bryce to their dad. And there are some similarities there. But what I love is that SJM immediately shows us why Bryce isn't their father, even though she might have some of that drive. So at this point, we get Syrinx, who is the cutest little, you know, dog-cat hybrid, which sign me up for that. And to Syrinx, it says, quote, "Bad," she hissed, half-heartedly, sure, but she tried to sound authoritative. Where the little beast was concerned, dominance was a quality they both pretended she had. And it's that illusion of power, and she doesn't have to insert it. It's so simple, but the fact that you start this chapter after a really tense scene between father and son, and you just have it where she's like, stop it, I can't be bothered, you know, like.
It just reminds me of me yelling at Dahlia and throwing my phone case half-heartedly before we started recording.
It was the funniest thing. You didn't even throw it like at her. You threw it like 5 feet from her. Not 5 feet, but like you're like, hey, stop that. And you throw it where it's like clearly nowhere, not going to hit her. And she doesn't even flinch.
Yeah.
Like you guys both pretend.
Yeah. I am Bryce and Dahlia is Syrinx.
Yes.
I love that you point this out, that we were just talking about illusions of power, and we see that demonstrated with Bryce and her pet right here. I mean, I guess Syrinx is not a pet. He is a free citizen. He is not a slave. However, he rules the roost, folks. When Bryce and Hunt start talking and they bring up Ruhn, Bryce calls her brother Prince Ruhn, and right now Hunt doesn't know that they're siblings, they're cousins. But it still feels weird for her to call him Prince Ruhn to Hunt when they're cousins. And I am so curious why she made that choice. What do you think?
I think we'll get into it.
Oh.
Circle back.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't have a thought, but like, you'll know when it happens.
Okay. All right. Well, put a pin in that.
We have a lot of pins in this episode. So I'm going to switch us over to Hunt, right? And this episode is really hard because he's being real sexist throughout the whole thing. Now, I want to clarify because I feel like people have really hard understanding when others say sexist. You can have sexist actions. You can say things that are sexist. You also don't have to be sexist. What I mean by that is, does Hunt fundamentally believe that he's better than Bryce because of their gender? Mm-hmm. No. Is Hunt using gender as a way to insult? Yes. And that's what I mean where, you know, and I talk about this with experience where like I've pointed out to so many men where it's like, that's sexist. They're like, I'm not sexist. I'm like, did I say you were? What you just said was sexist.
Right.
You know?
And I think we can clarify that by saying what you did is sexist. I do not think you are a misogynist. And that's the case with Hunt. I don't think he's a woman hater, which is what misogyny is.
Yeah.
I think he has been brought up in society that views sexism as acceptable.
I mean, it's the same way that we have the term run like a girl.
Right.
Or scream like a little girl.
Yep.
Where it's like, can you please clarify where this is weaker? Can you, like, why is this an insult? So, and again, this is like probably the most similar to our society. Mm-hmm. So I just want to start with all of this because I don't want people being like, you know, I don't think Hunt hates women. It's like, neither do I. But you don't have to hate women to do sexist or say sexist things.
Right. Exactly.
So here's an example. Quote, I hate to tell you this, sweetheart, but we're about to get real up close and personal. The way he said sweetheart, full of demeaning, condescending swagger, made her grind her teeth. So if you don't know who I'm talking about there, that was Hunt calling Bryce sweetheart. And again, it's one of those, like, they're professional relationships right here. You know, this is a professional dynamic. Mm-hmm. Don't call her sweetheart. You have no business. Again, but he's doing it to annoy her.
Right. There's nothing professional about Hunt. I'm sorry to say it.
No, and nor would I want there to be. But it's just the, like, he knew that would, like, right now, they're in a pissing match. Mm-hmm. They're trying to get on each other's nerves. And the only things that Hunt has are related to her gender.
Right. And I think that's because he is hyper aware of her gender.
Oh, yeah.
That to me, he is overcompensating for his attraction to her.
Oh, yeah. Like, well, you know what? How about you just walk away with your big, awesome boobs and butts and sexy legs, stupid, sexy legs. You know, like, he's 100% compensating for that. And I know you're going to point that out even more in a quote in a little bit, but other than her looks and her body, he also tries to go for her money as an insult. And he focuses on two things, right? He indicates that Bryce is spoiled, and he points out that that Syrinx and the apartment are expensive. And again, like, there's a sexist undertone there. There's like the idea of spoiled brat. You don't call men spoiled brats. I mean, we did it to Ruhn, but like in general, when you say, oh, they're such a spoiled brat, you could guess, people are going to think woman, that you're talking about a woman.
Absolutely. Because
that's the term that you save that for in general. And even when he's thinking about money and all this, you know, like, this doesn't make sense, how nice her apartment is. Like, he's not even thinking of the fact that, like, maybe she did earn it somewhere else. No. Maybe she sells feet pics.
Yeah. Or maybe she sells her dirty underwear. You know what?
Right?
Let her do her.
Side hustle. Let people have their side hustles.
I need a side hustle.
This is our side hustle.
From my point of view, what Hunt is doing is he's trying to disrupt whatever power Bryce thinks she might have in this situation so that she will comply with whatever he says. Mm-hmm. And Bryce retaliates, as she always does, through lies and humor. And that's the only way she has control or throws Hunt off what he assumes is his control. And it's just funny to watch the two of them go at it.
It's so good. I enjoy it so much. This is like genuinely one of her funniest books too.
Yeah.
And then, so Hunt comes in to Bryce, right? Real demanding, telling her what to do. I need you to make a suspect list, and you're going to have to, like you need to do this, you need to do that. And he's not approaching it as an equal, as a partner, as saying like, hey, we both need to do this. Like, and I get it. Hunt, there's a lot at stake for Hunt. But you don't have to be a dick about things. I mean, you do, because, like, it's a book in tension, and I love it. But, again, we're here to analyze. Initially, Bryce resists, right? Like, she's not compliant to him, She's, like, not telling him, yes, I'm going to make a list. Because, like, why should she tell him? Like, he's being a dick about things. And he kind of, like, does this roundabout insult with Bryce where... he's floating, but he's like flapping his little wings, talking her through the window. And he looks at Syrinx, and Syrinx is like going through her legs and, is like fawning over Hunt, and he calls Syrinx a good beastie. And again, like, she's not complying, but the pet is. And there's like kind of an immediate like comparison of like, you're not even, you're not being a good little pet and doing what I say. You're not a good beastie, but like, this animal is. Yeah. So it's also like.
Yeah, he's like, oh, look at your chimera who's dangerous, but is being so well behaved. Why can't you just be well behaved?
Could you try again?
If that was, I'm going to leave that in. My watch is like.
Responded to Syrinx.
I think it did. Yeah. Yeah. Hunt is just a complex man. But then through all of this, right? He wants her to be docile. He wants her to just do whatever he says, right? And again, to just like be this feminine, go with the flow. Yes, sir. Here's all of my information, sir. And stuff. But then he like looks at her and expects her to have a weapon. And he kind of like makes this question an insult. Quote, "Do you have any weapons?" The purely male gleam in his eye told her that he assumed she didn't. And again, like, be docile, be this weak person, but also like, do you have any weapons? And then adding the male gleam, again, it's that like aspect of like, there's a whole lot of gender play happening here.
Oh yeah, he's totally mocking her.
Yeah.
Because it's feminine to not have weapons.
Yeah.
Therefore, she must not have weapons because she's the ultra feminine.
Do you know what I just realized? I put my machete underneath my pillow the other night and I forgot to bring it out. And I've been sleeping with a machete underneath my pillow for a while. It is sheathed, but women have machetes too. Thank you for listening to part 1 of this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Tune in Thursday for part 2, where we finish covering this week's chapters.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a future mini episode.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo. Bye.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.